Welcome to the NFL Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast, and we've got the second to last week of NFL action here with the conference championship games on Sunday. We're going to be rolling through a couple of player props each, 3 to be exact. Maybe throw a couple leans your way as well. Nate coming off of a heater in the last round, 5-1, been crushing the playoffs so far, and I will look to pick it up off of that 2-4 that we went last week. I can make my excuses, and we can actually go into some bad beats, but let's just get into what we've got here for the two games. So let's kick it off with your first look here, Nate, for the Sunday action that we've got.
Yeah, I mean, in your defense, we didn't know the forecast too well, and we made some picks, like including my wrong pick on Josh Allen passing and your AJ Brown receiving that just did not account for the frigid snow. But we don't have too much weather, it seems, to coming in here. That being said, I'm still taking under on Pat Mahomes, 284.5 passing and rushing yards. And if you're scared of the passing, 25.5 rushing yards, I just don't think that's going to be there for him. We talked about last week taking the attempts and not the yards because he's not particularly fast. And the Bills, they zone up. So they allow the third fewest rush attempts to QBs, 7th fewest yards. They've held Mahomes to 29 rushing in 3 games in the regular season. They held him to 19 on 6 carries in the playoffs last year. And if you think the Chiefs are going to win the game, keep in mind that the kneel downs count as like a little -1 or 2. So that would hurt your rushing at the end. But as far as passing, like Buffalo has just dominated time of possession in the last 2 meetings here. 37 in the playoffs, 36 minutes in the regular season. Mahomes under in both. In the regular season, 196 passing at 5.2 yards per attempt, as Travis Kelce was just bracketed, taken away from him. They haven't really found much consistency anywhere else without Rashee Rice. I mean, Xavier Worthy's trying to fill that void, but I don't think you necessarily trust him. Certainly if the Bills have Christian Benford and they have other guys, like they're not a team that you can beat deep. And there was kind of like a desperation game plan in November. They were bombing it to Worthy all the time, hoping to break that big play. And they just couldn't do it because the Bills, they give up the 3rd fewest explosive pass plays. They zone you up. They keep everything in front of you, kind of like the Chargers, who have held Mahomes to 227 and 14 rushing in 2 meetings this year. And you might say like, oh, well, this Bills defense got pasted in a few games. Like those were in domes, like the Lions and Rams games in domes. So I filtered for outdoors this year. They've allowed 235 passing yards, only 1 over to future GOAT Drake May. No, I'm not going to go there. But, the point is they've allowed 26 fewer passing yards per game, 88 rating to the opponent outdoors. And Mahomes outdoors, you filter out his Super Bowl last year in the fair weather, 215 passing yards per game. The last 2 at home in cold temps in KC, under 60% completion, 6.7 yards per attempt. Bills, elite defense when leading or tied, holding teams to 5.5 yards per attempt. They've just been shutting it down. I think the Bills are going to win this game. I think you can read that with some of these picks. And I don't think Mahomes is going to be able to be Superman. Mahomes the magician, I'll call him, because he has pulled so many games out of his hat this year that they do not deserve to win. And I think the Bills are going to shut that down.
Pulled so many games out of his hat. Yeah, out of his hat, yes. For sure. That's the part of his body he pulled them out of. I have no notes. I like where your head's at. I think, you like adding the rushing, fine. That's the only thing that I might tweak is not adding it. But I mean, 284.5. He's really going to need to get over that like 30-yard mark at that point as well, I would imagine, to even feel like he's going to come close to it. So
he's not fast. And Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard are elite tackling linebackers. Like, no, yeah. It's
situational. But they're not sending that many deep routes. So they're not sending the safeties and the corners too far away. So there's always guys to keep him within that, 15, 20 yards of rush there, as long as they can also get a little bit of pressure on the quarterback to force him out earlier in the play. But yeah, this is going to be it's going to be freaking fun, man. We're getting the matchup that we've been asking for. So it's going to be a good one. I don't know if we're getting the matchup we're asked for the other game here, but I still think it's going to be entertaining as hell. I'm going to go for an over and kick us off with Dallas Goedert, over 38.5 receiving yards. Get in while the getting is good. As we know, there's only 2 games. So the public is paying attention, and those bets are moving pretty quickly here, as they are wont to do when we get to this point of the NFL season. But this play, although it's an over for Goddard, is a bit of a fade of Jalen Hurts' abilities, specifically to throw outside the numbers. And so I think we're really targeting a solid matchup spot combined with a quarterback who does not seem as though, especially when he's going to be playing in some nasty weather, that he is desires to throw it outside the numbers. Honestly, still looks pretty hobbled as well, and doesn't have the same sort of presence in the pocket as when he's able to get mobile and at least move around even behind the line of scrimmage to get himself some more time and allow guys like AJ Brown to keep working. He's actually averaged just 134.5 passing yards per game in 4 home playoff games for this guy, which is also crazy to think that he's had 4 home playoff games, but obviously Super Bowl run will help that. Washington has actually been pretty above average in terms of limiting rushing for the QB. You look at a couple of examples here with Baker, Kyler, Jalen, one of those times, and even Lamar got kept under 41 yards rushing. Those 4 right there, we're talking about 23.8 rushing yards per game for those guys. So I don't know that you're going to be able to get Jalen Hurts, who once again already looks hobbled, into those spaces to get that stuff. Maybe a zone read, but we saw him hand it off to Saquon every time and Saquon this game looking at 130 yards rushing as his line with 24.5 attempts. Like, man, I mean, there's 2 guys that you would see that line right now. It's him and Henry. And I mean, last week it worked for Gibbs. He still got 175 yards from scrimmage. They should have really they did try to ride him to victory. It was Goff that really couldn't do it for them. But Washington probably going to continue to stack the box against Saquon, like everybody has to do right now. The Rams did it last week. That leaves the middle of the field open behind those linebackers when they're stepping up to make sure that they can stop Saquon. They're biting on everything, right? On all the play fakes. Goddard went for 4 receptions last week, 56 yards in that same situation. And this is a playoff man too, a playoff performer. Last 8 in the playoffs, more than 5 receptions a game, 6.8 targets. So he's really connecting on those like 5 to 10 yard routes and picking them up. But it's still looking at about 53.5 yards per game with a decent yak on those as well. And if you look at Washington, 3rd worst defensive DVOA on interior passing. And that makes total sense when you look at their numbers versus tight ends, 28th in limiting their yards there as well. So 38.5 receiving yards. This should probably be a handful of yards more if you do bank on him having a solid 4 to 5 receptions in this game with where his ADOT's been.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You want to fade Hurts here, but everybody was jumping on that, and his passing total just continues to drop. And if you're fading the rushing, you just don't know where he's going to be at physically. It's because he was going off against Washington in this last meeting and then got injured. But right. If he looks like he did in the second half of that Rams game where he basically couldn't run at all and just like taking safeties, taking sacks, just looking like a detriment to this offense, you'd expect him to be conservative again. Yeah, just try to not golf it up, basically. Like you're saying, Jahmyr Gibbs dominated. Saquon's probably going to dominate here. Washington's going to have all eyes on him. So that just leaves Goddard to get a couple of cheap ones behind the line to mix it up a little bit, to get them to honor the passing game a little bit. Because AJ Brown might not be fully healthy. He's just a spot player as well. Hurts has been looking at Goddard in these playoff games. So I like the look there. Next one, also on the move, James Cook. I got it at 53.5. It's up to 57.5 at some places. I think still 55 at FanDuel. Really, I mean, you might want to look at a parlay here with the Bills at plus 3.5 and Cook 50 rushing. That's already plus money. And I just think there's not a world where the Chiefs win this game by 4 points. Like, that's just not how they do. And the Bills are just not going down easy. So I actually added an Allen anytime touchdown with that for plus 250 because I think Cook racks it up and then Allen finishes these drives. He has like 5 touchdowns on the ground in his last 4 playoff games, 2 against the Chiefs last year. But just looking at Cook, like, a bit overlooked. Number 3 in EPA among running backs this year, and not at all included in the conversation with guys like Gibbs and Barkley, right? He's still averaging 4.7 against the stacked front this year, and a lot of that is just because this Bills O-line is nasty, man. They are just absolutely elite. To get 79 rushing yards for Cook against Baltimore and 120 against Denver, those are the top 2 teams in terms of success rate the second half of the year, stopping the run. I mean, KC's good, we talked about, but they're about average in a lot of those same metrics, going up against the Bills offensive line that's 1st or 3rd on early downs or in the first half in all these advanced metrics. Chiefs could not stop Joe Mixon, and the Texans were like last in a lot of that stuff. That's why we were on the fade there. But the Texans O-line still had some success against this Chiefs team that blitzes a lot, that's just not able to deal with as much of a shifty guy like Cook, who did go 18 for 61 last year in the playoffs against this team. Maybe your reservation is he only went 9 for 20 in November, but Josh Allen sealed that game with his legs. So like there's going to be a lot of focus on Josh, even if the other guys mix in Ty Johnson, Ray Davis. Like the Bills are so committed to this thing, to pounding the rock with Cook. 19 attempts per game in his last 4 playoff games. Like, yeah, I mean, the attempts are only at 13 and a half, which is surprising here, but I think he can break off some plays because, man, he is one of the better backs out there. And this offensive line is just really what I'm leaning on, what the Bills are absolutely committed to.
Yep. And they've, Brady, the only thing he's really slowed down with Cook is the receiving a little bit more. He's definitely started to use Ty Johnson in those situations, which we started to see really in the middle of the season. So I do think they're going to continue to rely on Ty Johnson as a receiver, but that hasn't cut into the rush share by any means for James Cook. And I completely agree that if they can establish that in any way, if they can get better than 4 yards a carry with James Cook in this game, going to really, really up the opportunities for this squad. And otherwise, it's going to need to be another bit of Josh Allen rather taking over with his legs instead. But let me go to stick in this game rather and go to an under though for a rusher on the Chiefs here and go under 43.5 rush and receiving yards for Isaiah, who, man, just didn't get the burn down the stretch last game. And that's really a lot of what this is like, dude's still coming off major injury with a pretty crowded backfield here, as we've got P. Ryan really taking the bulk of the third down receptions, obviously, and even snap share there. And then Kareem Hunt finished that game for them last week and has been out snapping Pacheco every week, essentially, since he came back. Just 16 snaps in their win versus Houston. Hunt had 24, P. Ryan 11. So you see the pretty even distribution there for 3 guys. In his last 3 for Pacheco, 6.7 carries for 20.7 yards per game. -1 receiving yard, by the way, in there. I do like you adding the receiving. There's just not a world in which he's going to have a play designed for him. He's not going to be running very many routes at all. Route participation very, very down there. Obviously dead last on the team here for running backs. And he did have about 32% of the snaps in the last 3 as well, and 45% for Hunt. There was conversation that like maybe they're saving him more for the playoffs at this point, but I think we've seen what we've seen now to know that he's not fully ready to do that. 4 targets in those last 4 games as well, with 2 receptions for 14 yards. That is lower than a 20% route participation rate, which is 50th among running backs. And it's just, most importantly, it's dead last on his team. And if you look at the way the Bills bottled up Derrick Henry and dominated Denver, we start talking about them with a lot more respect, especially in the run game. Since week 12, this is the second best run defensive EPA on first and second down, which is obviously the most important for rushing when you're much more likely to do it on those downs. So I don't know that. And but most importantly for Pacheco, he's not going to be in there on third downs of anything greater than like 4 yards, right? If it may be a 3rd and 1 here and there to just get a yard or 2, but not anything that's going to be breakaway run plays or things that are meant to get large chunks of yardage. And we should mention too, the Bills run defense completely tied to Matt Milano coming back, being this incredible middle linebacker that can just cover the entire field and chase guys down as well as anybody else in the league. So I'll be happy to fade this. This is a ridiculously high number, honestly, for where we're at with Pacheco right now.
Yeah, I mean, down to 42, 41. Some books have even removed the receiving from it, being like, I don't know why we did this. Yeah,
why did we do that? Yeah.
-1 yards receiving. Like, he's only a threat on the screen pass, basically. And the Chiefs are not using him in any way. They consider Kareem Hunt a nice little swing route guy. That's why he's outsnapped him so much. P. Ryan gets all the third down work. So we've now checked off that the Bills have a much better offensive line and probably have advantages on the defensive line against a Chiefs team that has poor tackles and that has just not been able to establish the run. So, yeah, I think bet the Bills. Be bold. All right, so let's get to the other game here. A couple tight ends to finish off. Zach Ertz opened at even money for 4 receptions. It is now like -125 because, again, it just makes sense. Damn it. And so I think maybe you can ladder it up to 5 and get +154 for him to get 5 receptions. I still don't want to mess with the yards. He's a total like short A-dot and fall down guy. I think for a couple of years, he actually was the lowest yards after catch in the entire NFL. Oh, wow. He's just not trying to do anything else, not trying to get hurt, not trying to fumble like Mark Andrews. But he gets the Eagles here, who play a lot of cover 2 high shell. And that just leads to a lot of short receptions to the tight end, the fewest receiving yards to tight end, but that's perfect for Zach Ertz, who is, again, just short catch. The Eagles have been vulnerable in that quick game. allowing plus EPA on quick passes. And they've been very good limiting running quarterbacks. So again, we're looking at Daniels to scramble less often, his receivers to be kind of bracketed the way McLaurin was, or just blanketed by these really, really good corners that the Eagles have. And therefore, where's he going to look? He's going to look at Ertz, who's been his man in the red zone and on short yardage on these quick little slants and arrow routes. So I think we see more of what we saw in the first meeting when Ertz caught 6 of 7 targets as the Washington receivers got shut down than we did in that weird Week 16 game where he only caught 1. All the receivers had good games. I don't know what happened with the Eagles defense, but when Hurts got hurt, they just did not have it. And they gave up a season high 36 points, right? They could not stop Jaden Daniels. I think that was just a weird situation. He still ran 80% of the routes, though, Hurts did. And now we're looking at 70% of the routes in the playoffs, catching 4 a game. And you look at what again, with that high shell defense, Higbee caught 7 of 10 in the divisional round. Tucker Kraft, all 5 for just 26 yards, but it's just these quick little dump downs to say like, nothing else open down the field. So like, let's just get it underneath to the tight end, get a positive play and keep this thing moving.
Yep. I can see it for sure. Yeah, Ertz is going to continue to be a popular target for Daniels in those situations, and that outlet valve that'll help him out, to your point, when he's not able to use his legs as that outlet valve. But man, I'm still very, very impressed with the passing for this dude. I don't think that they're going to completely shut down Terry necessarily, but we'll see. It's either way, it's going to be crucial for Ertz to be there for that short yardage stuff, and then obviously others will go ahead and expand the field out. But yeah, like you mentioned and foreshadowed here, let's get to another tight end back to the AFC, Noah Gray. Not the one you were expecting, I'm imagining, but over 1.5 receptions. That's minus 120. 14.5 yards is also minus 110. Not terrified of it, but this really just comes down to the way that we see the Bills defense playing Travis Kelce, which is bracketing him, and just whatever zone they're running with however many safeties they have, just shade everything towards Kelce and whichever side of the field that he's running on, and then have at least another guy waiting for him when he runs into your section of the zone, but you got to have one guy's tailing him as well. So that's going to cover the bracketing for him. Gray has been the beneficiary of that stuff against Buffalo and in situations where they're playing familiar foes that know best how to at least limit what Kelce wants to do. 4 of the 5 targets that he got against them last game, 23 yards and 2 tutties. Obviously, those short yardage ones around the goal line. 51.5% route rate, though. And that's really what we go on here is like Noah Gray has upped everything for himself this season. I should say Andy Reid has upped everything for Noah Gray this season. That includes a 5-game heater earlier this season where he was at 3.5 receptions per game for about 38.8 yards. Also put up 6 tutties in that time frame. Might be worth a sprinkle on a little ATTD for Gray in this one as well. With, I mean, a few more options than they had in the middle of the season since they got Nuke, obviously. But now Kelce coming off of that huge playoff game as well, you got to imagine that they're going to be paying even more attention to him, allowing Gray to come off and have a bit more space to work with. He had 29 snaps, but that was only 10 fewer than Kelce. 57% snap participation at the very least. So he's on the field. 3 targets on 15 routes as well. So this dude, like, if he's out there, you know that he's going to be a legit option for Mahomes. And if you look at the playoffs, 75% catch rate in his last 3 playoff games. He and Mahomes definitely have the connection at this point. 97.6% true catch rate, indicating that when the ball is not necessarily catchable, this is adjusted for that, right? Like it's him when he's actually got a legit chance at pulling down one of these attempts from Mahomes. That's how you get that true catch rate. So as long as Mahomes stays as accurate as he's capable of, he actually has 121 QBR on his targets to Noah Gray. So we do think that if Noah Gray is able to get any kind of separation at all in this zone where he'll be facing the softest parts of it for sure, then we like him to get 2 receptions. The yards are fine, but I do prefer the receptions. Not worried about drinking any kind of like minus 120, minus 125. That's kind of how I'm going to be playing these things here with limited games and options left.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs brought him in basically for this exact scenario to be like, they're going to take away Kelce. Also, like maybe in the future, he can be our Kelce, but he's also a high school quarterback. He's also a guy who knows how to find the gaps in the zone and is more of a pure receiving tight end than a blocker. They do have Peyton Hendershot if they want to go total power on the blocking. So yeah, the fact that he runs routes on most of his snaps makes sense here. He even looks like Kelsey at times. So like you might see that underneath catch and be like, who is that? Oh, that's Noah Gray. But yeah, I mean, it's the Bills, the only team, like any person watching like very little knowledge of the NFL to be like, how is this dude still open in the middle of the field every time? He's not fast. He's not gaining much separation, but Travis Kelsey, against everybody when it matters, he's just getting open, except for the Buffalo Bills this year, who are just like, nope, shutting that down. See what else you got. And what else you got is going to be targeting Noah Gray more often than, easier to trust, I think, than a lot of these receivers on either team, because they're going like 5 deep with the Chiefs and the Bills on the receivers. It's just like, I can't really trust any of those dudes.
Yeah, can't trust any of the numbers that get too high as well for some of those receivers. Like you're saying, both these teams just going to spread the ball out. And this is going to be a guy who should be a beneficiary based on the fact that the guy in front of him on the depth chart is just going to have the focal point of the offense on him. So big ups there to Noah Gray this week. Let's get it done. And that is all the time we have for you in player props here for the conference championships here in the NFL. Definitely want to make sure to subscribe to that page, give that video a like. Going to have NBA videos throughout the rest of the couple of weeks, but obviously going to be a little break in NFL action until we get back to the Super Bowl with plenty of coverage here on the YouTube channel at thelines.com. So make sure you're checking all that out. And until we see you next, happy betting.